Now we'll take his allotted time. Um, There's mentioned off in the beginning of the testimony that there was a $1 billion loan guarantee for Ukraine. Seeing that we've discussed Ukraine, I guess I might as well ask some of the details about that. What bank provided the loan that we have guaranteed to Ukraine?
The loan wasn't provided by a bank. It was a bond issuance that the Ukrainian government did, and so the bonds were purchased by people from institutions, individual investors.
Major investor that bought those bonds, like Western European investors, maybe?
I will have to get back to you on that, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the details on
I'd
who
like to
purchased.
get a rundown as to who bought the bonds that we are now guaranteeing. Because the fact is, whoever makes the loan is the real recipient of our largesse. Ukraine is not the recipient. Whoever loaned the money to Ukraine is making a guaranteed profit via the United States taxpayers. That's true of all of these guaranteed loans that we talk about here, and we have to realize that it's a big issue coming up on the Export-Import Bank. And who's the real recipient of all of this, all of these billions of dollars that the Export-Import Bank guarantees? It's not the companies that they're talking about, it's the banks who are in the middle who make that money because they have now a guaranteed profit. And I don't understand how we can, I don't have a way right now of how we can get away from that system, but it seems that we are paying, that there's a lot of middlemen making a lot of money off benevolent programs like this. So it is possible that those bonds that you're talking about were actually purchased by some financial institutions in Western Europe. Isn't that true?
It's possible. It is possible, and
possible.
we can get back to you with a more
Now,
detailed
how did we
answer
get
to
involved
your
in this
question.
Ukrainian problem in the first place? They had their first real free election, I remember, about 10 years ago, and in came with the Orange Revolution, and I visited there during the Orange Revolution in support of the Orange Revolution. And they had a corrupt government, and they then brought in a government. Then there was an election, and they were elected. And that government turned out to be corrupt, even though they were pro-Western. And that's why you, in a very free election that was verified by the OSCE, that you had Mr. Yanukovych, who was elected, right? Democratically elected president, who was overthrown by the people who we now are pouring our resources into. And he was overthrown before the election process, not as a result of the election process. I don't think that is a good precedent for us to set. I don't think that when an elected government is overthrown that we necessarily have to come in and we should do some really soul searching, because I believe there were powerful forces at play, maybe even European financial interests that didn't want Ukraine to be associated with a Russian common market as compared with a Western European common market that may have been at play here. I don't know. It just seems that that may well be the root of this problem. And here we end up pumping $1 billion worth of guarantee into some financial supporters who may be those same Western Europeans. It is a very murky situation, and it is not, as some of my colleagues believe, to be as simple and as easily definable as who's the good guy and who's the bad guy as you might assume. Let's get back to your request. $625 billion. Does the $1 billion that we have a loan guarantee, that doesn't come off the $625 million request? So for all of your jurisdiction, you're asking for $625 million, the administration is, and yet we have just provided one country, Ukraine, with a $1 billion loan guarantee. Okay. I guess that's resulting because there's a crisis going on, and we need to, because there's a crisis, we need to get involved in it. I would suggest that we don't need to get involved in all of these crises. I would suggest that perhaps it would be better for us not to be doing that. And unless it's an emergency, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that we should focus on if there is an emergency humanitarian situation, that is far different than having us come into other societies like Ukraine and trying to restructure the way they have their government and their society functions, which it seems like we are trying to do. And ridding Ukraine and some of these other countries like Ukraine of corruption would be the equivalent, I guess, of ridding Ireland of beer. And it's part of, beer is their culture up there, and you don't try to tell people in Ireland not to drink beer. Well, corruption is a way of life with some of the people and that we know, and for us to placate all of our policies on changing a basic way of life does not make sense to me, because I don't think it's going to happen. I think we tried that in Iraq, and it didn't work. We can try to make, we can try to say to other people that they shouldn't have religious faith, but it may be really part of their culture that they have a religious faith. And maybe even they include it in their government. And our theory of government is that church and state should be totally separate. I think it would be wrong to go into another country and say to them, I'm sorry that we're going to try to put pressure on you to make sure that church and state are never allowed to be together. And I would hope that our limited funds that we have are not, all the goals that you've outlined today are lofty goals. I mean, certainly ridding a country of corruption is a lofty goal. It just seems to me that I'm not confident that we're going to achieve that goal. And I'm also confident that when we try to get too deeply involved, there are international forces that are at play that can manipulate our largesse and our benevolence.